Earlier this week, I came to the Senate floor to speak about the importance of the forestry title in what is a bipartisan farm bill that we're considering right now as I speak. In my previous remarks, I spoke about a growing emergency in our nation's forests caused by the largest bark beetle outbreak in our recorded history, an outbreak that's projected to kill nearly every lodgepole pine in Colorado. And I know the presiding officer from the neighboring state of New Mexico is experiencing these same conditions in his state. The Forest Service has estimated that 100,000 dead trees are falling in our forests every day. Hard to imagine, but their estimates are such. 100,000 trees every day. And that means that our landscapes are littered with tinder ready to burn, which combined with the hot, dry summer that we are already experiencing is a recipe for a disastrous fire season. Mother Nature bats last, which means that much of what we face is out of our control. But we can act, and we must act, in order to manage the magnitude of the crisis in our home states. In some ways, I know the presiding officer sees this the same way I do. The forests in Colorado are the canaries in the coal mine that tie us into and identify the effects of a changing climate. Warmer temperatures and drought conditions have exacerbated beetle infestations in our forests, and we're now dealing with an unprecedented combination of explosive fire season events. There's a raging Colorado wildfire today as I stand here in Larimer County, the High Park Fire, and it continues to grow. It's consumed over 46,000 acres. It's claimed the life of a local homeowner, and it's causing devastating effects on the surrounding communities. As of first thing this morning, only 10% of the fire had been contained. We've made sure, though, that all available resources are dedicated to this effort. I'm told that we now have over 1,000 firefighters on site, which is good news. We won't know the true cost of the fire for some time, but it's undoubtedly will have a lasting effect on my state. And I want to assure Coloradans that I will continue to closely monitor the High Park Fire to ensure that firefighters on the ground have all the resources they need to beat back this devastating blaze. I also want to urge my fellow Coloradans to heed the warnings and follow the evacuation guidance of the firefighters that are tasked with keeping us safe. Most importantly, I ask that we keep these brave public servants in mind as they work to protect lives and personal property, especially as what is a very unpredictable fire progresses. Again, I know the presiding officer's had a series of fires in his state, and he knows the capricious nature of wildfire. Now, I want to also, in giving a little more background, point out that the High Park Fire is burning predominantly on private land, but it is moving rapidly into a beetle-infested national forest. And this is a reminder of exactly why we need flexibility to treat hazardous beetle-killed trees and to engage the public in an active and collaborative management of our nation's forests. We can't reverse the tragic loss of life and property that the High Park Fire and many other fires have caused, but it's essential that we take steps to understand what can be done in the future to better prevent, prepare, and respond to wildfires. And we must learn more about the conditions that make those fires catastrophic. Let me just start by talking about homeowners. Homeowners can create what we know in our states is called defensible space, DEF space. And that involves clearing brush, moving wood piles, looking at other actions that you can protect your structures through. And those actions have been proven to be the hallmark of what saves such properties in past fires. And these are important takeaways that we've learned in my state of Colorado in the wake of catastrophic fires, and they're the result of subsequent stories and studies that I've called for that inform the public about what they can do to protect their homes and property. The same studies have also taught us that federal forest management policies must prioritize tree removal around communities, to protect homes, roads, and infrastructure, something that I've fought for to provide resources for over the last decade. And the added benefit to these efforts is that they create local jobs and they support the critically important timber industry in our states. But that's not all, Mr. President. We must also advance new policies that will actually help prepare our firefighters to combat these raging fires. A recent example of this is action that the Senate took to pass a bill I co-sponsored to expedite the purchase of much-needed air tankers to fight wildfire. Our nation's tanker fleet has aged and dwindled dramatically in recent years, and without sufficient air tankers, we are ill-prepared to respond to catastrophic fires, especially multiple fires at once. I'm pleased that the Congress passed this bill, and I understand that the President is prepared to act quickly to sign the air tanker legislation into law. Still, we need to and we can do more. Mr. President, we need more flexibility to treat forests more comprehensively. And I believe, as I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks, that the forestry title of the Farm Bill is a good start. However, I believe it doesn't go far enough to authorize adequate resources to treat forests that have been affected by bark beetle infestations. The Forest Service bark beetle strategy calls for doubling the number of acres it has been able to treat in the past years. In other words, the Forest Service is saying, look, we want to double what we've been doing. We believe we have the expertise to do that. What else do they need, though? They need money. And in fiscal year 2011, the Forest Service allocated $110 million to treating acres affected by bark beetles in the western United States. But if we're going to double that acreage, we're going to need more federal support. A year ago, I fought to increase the amount of funding that the Forest Service had available to treat hazardous trees. I worked with the administration and strongly supported a reprogramming request that would have allowed the Forest Service to use extra money to treat problem areas in the West. The Senate supported this common sense request, but I have to tell you, unfortunately, the House Appropriations Committee stood in the way of getting these critical funds into the forests where it was and it's still needed most. So that inaction meant that thousands of acres of beetle-killed trees were not treated, areas that are potentially now worsening the High Park fire as we speak. In the new Farm Bill, the Agriculture Committee has authorized $100 million for designated treatment areas affected by beetle infestation, which is less money than last year and certainly not enough to double the number of acres that were targeted for fire prevention and tree removal. At the current authorization level of $100 million, the Forest Service simply will be unable to meet its goal. So, Mr. President, to help remedy this, I've filed a bipartisan amendment, number 2295, with Senator Thune of South Dakota, which would increase the authorization for funding to $200 million to authorize adequate resources in order for the Forest Service to address these looming and immediate emergencies. I've been a strong advocate for finding ways to ensure that we're prudent in how we spend taxpayer dollars. But the need to address this crisis is immediate, and the threat to public health, safety, and our economy will only get worse, causing us to pay more later. Another way to put it is it's less expensive to prevent fires, to prepare for fires, than it is to fight fires and then be involved in the rehabilitation of those landscapes after those devastating fires are finally put out. In addition to the amendment that I've filed with Senator Thune that would provide for increased authorization for the funding of tree removal, I've also filed Amendment 2294 that would extend Colorado's Good Neighbor Authority. Good Neighbor Authority gives the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management the capability and the power to enter into cooperative agreements with state foresters to plan and implement forest health projects on more acres more efficiently. This would give my state and other states the opportunity to collaborate with federal agencies to perform forest, rangeland, and watershed restoration services, actions that a study I requested after the 4 Mile Canyon fire in Boulder County in Colorado found firsthand helps agencies and homeowners better prepare to reduce the risk of damage and loss of life from wildfires. Now, lest viewers and those who are interested in wildfire think that they're an aberration, wildfires are actually a fact of life in the West and in forests in general, and they will continue to occur over and over again in Colorado. But I'm committed to doing everything possible to learn from every fire and take whatever precautionary measures we can with the hope of saving more lives, property, and communities in the future. As I've said before, and we all know, wildfires can easily become a multi-million-dollar effort affecting every level of government. As the bark beetle epidemic continues to present a significant threat to our economy, critical infrastructure, and important natural resources, we must allocate resources to address this epidemic up front in a common-sense way. Again, I know the presiding officers faced these challenges head-on in his state, and some may see this as just solely a Western problem. But I urge my colleagues to support bipartisan efforts to ensure that we manage our forests to reduce fire risk, protect water supplies, and bolster our economy. Our forests all over our country are susceptible to fires and vulnerable to fires. We can work together in the Senate to ensure that we have the tools to protect our forests and protect the communities and the people that live in those communities. So, Mr. President, I appreciate your interest. I appreciate our partnership, and I look forward to the Senate taking up these two important amendments in the near future as we hopefully move the Farm Bill to passage in the Senate and to the President's desk.